Welcome to another FPL video. We're going to be doing the transfer tips ahead of double Gameweek 34, 3 players to buy, hold, sell and skip for each section, and let's get straight into this. I say 12 players lightly actually because we're going to be talking about 2 in particular in this first buy of the video. I think you can't go wrong with either Mason Mount or Kai Havertz. I was asked this in the stream yesterday, which one do you prefer? And I would go for Mason Mount at this moment in time. He scored in 3 games in a row for the first time in his career in the Champions League, FA Cup and the Premier League. Whilst Kai Havertz has been in good form for the last month or two, but if you look at the last 3 or 4 games, Mason Mount definitely has the edge. Statistically across the season as well, Mason Mount has 10 goals and 9 assists compared to Kai Havertz who has 7 goals and 3 assists. Mason Mount has more minutes and more games played, but there is a difference there, and you can also point towards the fact that Havertz does play as a false 9, especially recently, whilst Mason Mount doesn't have that same role. So you would expect Kai Havertz to be better statistically, but he isn't. Even in terms of the XG, it's very similar. Kai Havertz with fewer minutes has a slightly higher XG, but not enough to really warrant that extra 0.4 million. And in terms of expected assists, Mason Mount has triple the amount of Kai Havertz almost. In terms of big chances, 9 for Mason Mount compared to Kai Havertz's 13. So there is a bit of a notable difference in that regard, but then big chances created 9 for Mason Mount, whilst Kai Havertz only has 2. So in terms of creativity, Mason Mount is always going to win. He's almost in double digits for both goals and assists, so this is his best season by far. And a lot of these goal contributions have come against the likes of Southampton, Burnley, Norwich, but he is getting those goal contributions one way or another. And I don't think that Havertz is a bad option by any stretch of the imagination, but if you're in a position where you have 2 Chelsea defenders and you need only 1 midfielder or attacker, Mason Mount would be my preference at the moment, but Kai Havertz is still a buy as well. It's just in the pecking order at the moment, I would slightly favour the Englishman. Chelsea defenders are a buy in general, but I'd be very careful as to which defender you end up buying, because you have Antonio Rudiger, who for me is actually the pick of the bunch at the moment, and this is because Chelsea have changed things tactically a little bit, where Reece James is playing as a right centre-back, and then they're able to play Ruben Loftus-Cheek as the right wing-back against teams with a tricky winger like Zaha at Crystal Palace. Maybe they'll do the same against Arsenal tomorrow, against Martinelli, and this could be the case as well in other games, such as the one against Manchester United very soon. So I would be careful about Reece James. I don't think he might be as explosive, and this is probably going to come back to bite me, isn't it? But he might not be the same FPL asset as he was at the beginning of the season in this late run-in. He's still a great option, of course, and I'll talk about him very soon, but I think Rudiger would be my priority. Then you have the likes of Marcos Alonso, who has a lot of attacking threat, and he's been in great form recently. Even in the Champions League, he scored a goal that was maybe controversially disallowed, and also in the Premier League, he got a 13-point return in Gameweek 32. But Antonio Rudiger is just a safe and secure pick who also offers plenty of goal threat. In terms of the numbers, he's got 3 goals and 3 assists, which is very good for a centre-back. His XG is just over 3, so there's not really an overperformance there. It pretty much matches what the stats are saying. 3 big chances as well, and in terms of big chances created, only 0. You compare it to someone like Fabian Schär, who we spoke about last week. He has more creativity than someone like Rudiger, but then you also look at in terms of the goal threat, and Rudiger's the one on the receiving end of those chances. Fabian Schär tends to do these kind of layoffs, and that's why he's got the better creativity stats. But I think Rudiger's a great option. He's only 0.1 million less expensive than Reece James, but to be honest, right now there's not much to separate the two, and if Reece James is going to be less nailed, then why would you go for him over the likes of Rudiger? I still think Alonso's a great buy as well if you're considering them, but in terms of the ranking for the Chelsea defenders, personally I'd go for Rudiger first, Reece James second, and Marcos Alonso third, but all of them offer great value. There's also Thiago Silva, who's going to be one of the more nailed defenders in the heart of that Chelsea defence, but then you look at Christensen and a few others like Azpilicueta, Chalobah. I don't think I'd go there. I would rather go for one of these defenders, Rudiger, Reece James, or Marcos Alonso. Pukki has been flying under the radar. I haven't spoken about him enough, and that game against Manchester United is now kind of, I'd say, collectively changed the perceptions around Pukki in FPL, because he does play in the worst team arguably in the division, but he's still getting those points. He did very well against Manchester United with a goal and an assist. He's got 10 goals for the season, and he's right up there in terms of the highest performing forwards in terms of FPL points and even goals scored. His XG is 9.35, so it kind of matches what the stats are saying. There's a slight overperformance, but only just. His expected assists is 5.38, which is very decent for a striker who's 5.9 million, so there is a gross underperformance in terms of the assists there. 13 big chances, which is the same as Kai Havertz, and 7 big chances created. These are very good stats for a 5.9 million forward. You look at the likes of Broja, for example, who has been awful for a long period of time in FPL. You could easily switch from him to Timo Pukki, and if not, there's always someone like Mateta who's a bit cheaper, but I think Pukki would be the standout. Pukki, Tony and Harry Kane look like the three best forwards in the game at the moment, and there's still a few others like Ronaldo, of course, once everything kind of clears up maybe in the next few weeks, but honestly, I'm not a big fan of the forwards this season. Pukki, though, has shown some consistency recently, and I would go for the Finnish international. Another thing I'd like to mention about Timo Pukki, which is very important and why I think he's a buy even now, is because in double Gameweek 36, he's one of the few forwards that has some sort of form and consistency that actually doubles in that game week. So he's a great option in the long term. He's got a few difficult fixtures along the way, but I still think he's a great option in Gameweek 36 and until the end of the season, because on the whole, the fixtures aren't that bad, especially when you compare it to Watford. If you want to get Dennis, Cucho, it looks like he's going to be out for the season, but even when you compare Pukki to him, Pukki has better stats and he's shown more consistency, and on top of that, he has better fixtures. So I think Pukki's a great option, and he can also solve your Gameweek 36 problem, especially if, like myself, if you don't have someone like Harry Kane up front and you're struggling with the likes of Che Adams, Broja, Weghorst, etc., Timo Pukki is a great solution to your problem. So I think he's a great buy, even in Gameweek 34. Reece James is arguably a buy, and the same goes for Marcos Alonso and Rudiger, as I discussed earlier, but I'd be a bit careful about him. If I had no Chelsea defenders, personally, and I had to pick one, Rudiger would be my pick, and I just want to stress this point throughout this video. I could be wrong, and if Reece James plays as a right wing back again, then he could definitely make me eat my words, basically. But throughout the season, of course, amazing goal output, 5 goals and 6 assists in 19 games. If you're looking to double up on Chelsea defence, then yes, I would buy Reece James and Rudiger. That would be my ideal duo. But you could also go about things differently and go for Havertz and Mason Mount in the midfield, and then go for one defender. And another point that I didn't mention with Rudiger is that the fixtures in Gameweek 34 aren't the greatest from a defensive point of view, and they could keep a clean sheet there. Chelsea have that quality, but you wouldn't bank on it completely. Then the fixtures afterwards, you could see some clean sheets along the road, but maybe not as many as the likes of Manchester City and Liverpool. So Reece James, despite the fact that he's one of the best Chelsea options and defenders in the entire game, his recent positioning as the right centre-back does cause a few concerns, and if he's not going to be as nailed as someone like Rudiger, once again, why would you then go for Reece James instead? Doesn't really make too much sense, but of course, he always has that attacking upside, which no other defender at Chelsea really has, apart from maybe Marcos Alonso and Ben Chilwell when he's fit. So I think that Reece James is a hold, and if you're looking for a double up in Chelsea defence, then I would go for Antonio Rudiger and Reece James. I made this list before the news broke out yesterday about Ronaldo losing his newly born child. Obviously, condolences go out to him and his family. It's a huge shame, and it's one of the worst things that could happen to you, basically. Now, I still think Ronaldo's a hold. He's not going to play against Liverpool today. That is completely confirmed. But there is still a chance that he's going to play against Arsenal, and if not, he will play against Chelsea. And I would back him with the mentality he has and obviously the quality. He could easily bounce back from any situation. Of course, this is something completely different and something, life-changing, and obviously one of the worst things that can happen. But Ronaldo right now, if you made that switch from Kane to Ronaldo, I think it's definitely worth keeping him. And his stats, I always talked about this, are very good. And yes, maybe I made a mistake in Gameweek 33 saying that he's a skip. For those on a free hit, I think it made sense, but I still wouldn't really want him long term. Now he has that double against Chelsea and Arsenal. I think it's worth keeping him for that, and maybe the Brentford game. But even the likes of Brighton, for example, in Gameweek 36, I think that United could struggle there greatly, as they showed against Arsenal and Tottenham. Brighton are actually a pretty good team. They just lack that clinical finisher. But really with Ronaldo, Harry Kane is still my preference over the Portuguese international. I would still keep him for this double. Let's wait and see, though. If we get any inklings about him missing out in the first game against Arsenal, then I think it would be worth selling him. And it would be a big shame as well, obviously, because he had a double at least, and he's got a decent fixture afterwards in Brentford. But personally, I think Cristiano Ronaldo is worth holding for the time being. If anything changes in terms of the news, then I would reconsider. Lastly, we have Matty Cash. I'm going to talk about a few other Aston Villa players later on in this video, but I think Cash is the one that really stands out to me, especially if you're looking for a Doherty or Tierney replacement. But in terms of if you have him already, I think it's very simple. You hold him. Would I buy him right now? Probably not. I'd buy him in Gameweek 35 ahead of that Norwich fixture. Then he has a double. Well, back-to-back doubles, actually. Then Man City in the last game of the season, but you could bench him, especially if you go really big at the back and you have the likes of James, Rudiger, Cancelo, Trent and Robertson. But I would personally keep Matty Cash. The others, I'd still be tempted to sell because I'm not a big fan of the likes of Coutinho, at least in the form that he's in at the moment. I think he could easily change that and he can be a great option like he was in double game week 28, but the likes of Watkins never really appealed to me. But Matty Cash has been one of the best performing defenders this season. 3 goals and 3 assists. You can't forget his legendary performance in double game week 28, where I think he became the 3rd highest scoring player in any single game week with 29 points, which is absolutely unbelievable. His XG and XA are pretty decent, but the goals and assists, just the slightest of overperformance there, but still kind of matching the stats overall. 2 big chances and 3 big chances created. He has been what we wanted Luca Dean to be. Now, he hasn't performed since double game week 28, but I would expect him to get some returns over the next 4 game weeks, especially from game weeks 35 to 37. So for me, Matty Cash is definitely worth holding, and from game week 35 onwards, I would say he's a buy. I talked about this in all of my videos and streams recently. It's a big shame that the goalkeepers are really lackluster at the moment. Schmeichel is by far the standout. Ramsdale was looking like a great choice and probably the new Martinez or Pope in the first half of the season. But Arsenal have just tailed off completely and they're conceding goals left, right and centre. They're not scoring enough and they're such a fragile team at the moment. And from the last 14 shots that Arsenal have faced, they have conceded 8 goals, and Ramsdale has been in poor form as well, so he has contributed to that, although the defence and the defensive protection has been awful throughout the whole team. So I personally would sell Aaron Ramsdale if you have a spare free transfer. If you don't, then it wouldn't make sense to do it for a hit, or if it would jeopardise your future plans, or also the plans to get a Chelsea player in, for example. Otherwise, I think he's worth selling. If you have 2 free transfers, I definitely would go ahead with it and go for Kasper Schmeichel. Obviously, it's a team-dependent thing. If you don't have triple Chelsea or you're struggling to get any of their players in, then this is not a priority transfer in my opinion. But you look at the stats, they're not that bad to be fair. 12 clean sheets for Aaron Ramsdale. Arsenal have 13 overall with that clean sheet against Aston Villa with Leno in goal. Their expected clean sheets is 9.66, but I think in most cases there is an overperformance in terms of expected clean sheets and the actual clean sheets figure. Big chances conceded, 37, not too bad actually, especially when we compare it to Leicester and Schmeichel, which is I think double that almost. Then XGC is 31.76, once again not too bad, and 28 goals conceded. These are pretty good stats overall, but if you look at the last few game weeks, Arsenal have been woeful and their form and their next few fixtures are absolutely awful, and I honestly don't really see where the points are going to be coming from, and also the clean sheets, and especially with the goals. That is Arsenal's main problem, scoring goals, but even at the back they look fragile. I would personally sell Aaron Ramsdale and most of these Arsenal assets. The only one I would consider holding, and I talked about this in the last transfer tips video, is Bukayo Saka, but even then I'm losing patience with him as well. Che Adams was benched in Southampton's 1-0 victory over Arsenal, and Ralph Hasenhüttl changed things up a little bit with a back 5 because after that performance against Chelsea they needed to change things up and shore things at the back, and Che Adams was the sacrificial lamb. Now I don't think he's going to be benched until the end of the season. He could still get some games. Maybe Broja is the one that's going to be benched. But at 6.9 million, is he worth that money? I don't think so. Around the same price you can get Ivan Toney. Yes, he plays Tottenham and Man United back-to-back, but he's still a better option until the end of the season. And not only that, for $1 million cheaper, you can get Timo Pukki, who I discussed at the beginning of this video. So I think there are better alternatives. Jean-Philippe Mateta as well is another one to consider. So I just don't think it's worth keeping Che Adams. If you have that spare free transfer, then I would go ahead with it. Another thing you could do if you have the money is go from Che Adams to Timo Werner, and that could be a great differential double game week player. So Che Adams has been decent throughout the season, 7 goals and 4 assists, pretty similar returns to Phil Foden actually. The stats translate into the goal output, so no problems there, 11 big chances, and Che Adams has had a decent season, and there was one spell where he was showing some consistency, but I think it's worth selling him, and even Broja potentially. Despite back-to-back returns against the North London clubs, I think Leandro Trossard is a sell. He's someone that burned me in double game week 22, if I remember correctly, getting him and Ronaldo in for a -4 instead of Bruno Fernandes, and that was kind of one of those 50-50 swings that were massive. The same goes for those that went for Bruno this week over the likes of Ronaldo. But Trossard, look, he's been showing some form. He's been Brighton's most creative and lively player in the front 3 positions, but I'd still sell him. His underlying numbers aren't anything special, only 6 goals and 1 assist, a lot of blanks throughout the season. Of course, a lot of people would then say, well, look at those fixtures coming up, why not keep him? But I just think there's so many midfielders to choose from, even Kulusevski, who doesn't have a double this week, but still a great option, Mason Mount, Kai Havertz, Mohamed Salah, Diego Jota, Heung-min Son. There's so many to choose from. I'm not even going to waste my time going through all of these names. So I think that Trossard is worth selling. He's done the business for you if you kept him for this long. Congratulations. Enjoy the points. but I personally still think it's the time to sell, and I don't see him replicating this form until the end of the season. If he does, then fair enough, and he could be someone to consider next season, but I personally don't see it. That's not to say he's going to blank in every single game, but I would be very cautious about him and not buy into the hype and also chase last week's points. So for me, Leandro Trossard is a sell. Jadon Sancho isn't a bad option by any stretch of the imagination, and he could be a very good differential in double Game Week 34, but I personally wouldn't go for him. I'd still prefer Bruno Fernandes and Cristiano Ronaldo should he be available for those games and in time. But as for Jadon Sancho, I just don't really see it. The underlying numbers don't point towards anything special. The goal output matches the underlying numbers like the XG and the XA, but I just don't think it's worth it. 3 goals and 4 assists. He's still adapting to this league, and he just hasn't shown his quality that he did in the Bundesliga. 25 shots overall, 8 on target, 21 shots inside the box. I just don't like these numbers. 5 big chances and 5 big chances created. I think there's a lot more to come from Jadon Sancho, and next season it can really kick on, especially with Ten Hag as the manager, but I just don't see it right now, and I wouldn't buy Jadon Sancho ahead of the next few fixtures. I mean, if you look at United's running until the end of the season, it's nothing special, and despite this double in 34, I would happily pass. Philippe Coutinho is a very streaky player, and what he did in double Game Week 28 cannot be ignored. If he shows that kind of form into this upcoming period, then I would definitely consider him. But for the time being, he's someone to keep on your watch list and skip right now. But if he shows that kind of form, then, you know, games against Norwich, that double, despite the fact that it contains Liverpool, but then back-to-back doubles is the kind of main appeal there. That double in 37 looks amazing. And if you don't have a free hit left, players like Coutinho could be a really good purchase for you. The same goes for Maddison from Leicester, etc. So that's when I would consider him. His numbers aren't anything special, but he's only played 12 games, 4 goals and 3 assists. It's still a healthy return, and 3 big chances, 5 big chances created. So I still think he's a good option, but I'll keep an eye on him for now and not buy him just yet. If you have him, then I'd possibly hold on to him for the time being, but even then, if he's your only route to the likes of Mason Mount or Kai Havertz, I would happily sell and then reassess later on. The last player we're going to discuss in this video is Ollie Watkins. I personally think he's a skip. He is also a bit of a streaky player, but I just don't see it right now. And those forwards I talked about, Harry Kane, Timo Pukki, Mateta, and Ivan Toney, I think those are the 4 best forwards in the game. You could also add Ronaldo to that list to make the top 5. I just don't think Ollie Watkins is worth it. If you're looking to free hit in 37, then you can bring him in at that point, and maybe he can do very well for you. But I just don't trust him enough, even with fixtures like Norwich, to really capitalise and do the business. That's not to say he won't. He still can. It's just I don't have the confidence in Ollie Watkins. He always is a very frustrating player. His XG is almost 10. 8 goals and 2 assists. I mean, decent underlying numbers, nothing special, but 15 big chances is slightly impressive. But then you compare it to players like Pukki with 13, who is 5.9 million, compared to Ollie Watkins around the 7.5 million mark. And that's what I mean. I would rather have someone like Timo Pukki than Ollie Watkins. That's not to say he can't deliver, and I might be wrong about this one, but I personally don't see it. And until I see some consistency, I think Ollie Watkins is a skip. Thank you very much for watching this video. It's much appreciated as always. If you haven't already, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a single upload or stream. We've got plenty more along the way for FPL and UCL Fantasy, so stay tuned for that. If you haven't already, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM. There's a Discord server in the description below. You can just click the link and you automatically join. The same goes for the FPL League, and you can also consider joining us on Patreon or as a channel member if you want to support the channel even further. So that'd be much appreciated as always. Thank you to everyone who's already done so. Take care, enjoy the football. All the very best of luck for double Game Week 34, as well as the rest of double Game Week 33, and I'll see you next time.